Hello and welcome to Tattva Deep, Conversations and Explorations. A series of conversations on sociology is now over. It was a very interesting experience altogether, as it gave us an insight into the world of sociology, what it does, and what it might essentially be. Based on how our guests described their understanding of what sociology is, it seems to us that it's about understanding three things: people, society, relationships. Of course, there are other things that enter the picture, things like choice, myths, meaning of value, empathy, beliefs, order, disorder, education, and all those other things one would expect the discipline of sociology to explore and understand. But at its core, it seemed to be about people, in terms of our behavior and how we engage with each other, society, in terms of what it essentially is, how it functions, and what it consists of, and about relationships between people, people and society, the often overlooked relationship between society and nature, and what the underlying meaning of all these relationships might be. You might have noticed that at Tattva Deep, we like to think of films as insights disguised as stories. And we decided to put our understanding of the essence of sociology to the test with the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz. This story has been interpreted countless times, whether politics, economics, symbology, mythology, or numerology. People have used this film to understand and explain various phenomena. Perhaps it got something fundamentally right, and therefore, we thought it'll be interesting to see what the film throws up when we see it from a sociological point of view, that is to say, in terms of its society, people, and their relationships. The film offers a comparison between two outcomes: a Kansas based outcome, where Dorothy feels lost and helpless, and an Oz based outcome, where Dorothy finds her way home. Although interlinked, the two outcomes are vastly different from one another, and there are reasons for that, namely, people around her and the society that they've created for her. Let's start with Kansas. So, what kind of people inhabit Kansas? Well, six kinds of people, or shall we say attitudes, thrive in Kansas. Those who misuse power and reason, the predator, so to speak. Those who are preyed upon. Those who are poor listeners and thoughtless. Those who don't pay attention to anything other than themselves. Those who like to lie and put on appearances, but are not without good faith and kindness. These six attitudes share different types of relationships with each other. The result of the intermingling of such attitudes creates a society which is reflected in Dorothy. There's no doubt that she's loved and cared for by those around her, but she's also misguided, lost, confused, perpetually doubtful, and afraid. Although she has an edge to her, she has not yet learned how to apply it. With all her half gifts and half blessings, she is very likely to perpetuate the society that she is an outcome of, unless, of course, she is blown away by a twister, as she is. Nature, as an agent of transformation in some sense, lands her in a place called Oz. It's quite different from Kansas, with its burst of color, thriving farms and forests. But what kind of people is Oz home to? Those who are pure evil, those who are good, those who love to laugh and play, those who are honest, vulnerable, and bent on seeking what they truly desire, and those who like to lie and put on appearances. These five attitudes share different types of relationships with each other, and their intermingling creates a different kind of society, as is reflected in an improved version of Dorothy. The Dorothy of Oz is self-reliant, courageous, straightforward, someone who knows her mind and is not afraid to speak it. It is here that her edge is properly sharpened, and her naive innocence is transformed into refined conduct. With the blossoming of her gifts, one can say that the society that the Dorothy of Oz will bring to life would be positively different from the one that might be brought to life by the Dorothy of Kansas. The three elements that sociology attempts to study: people, society, and relationships are connected to each other in so many ways that it's hard to say where one ends and the other begins. This makes the effort made by sociologists laudable. And to this, we would like to add those people who have come to understand and consciously contribute to the growth and understanding of their own societies, both individual and collective. We hope that through our conversations with our guests, we were able to get under the skin of the discipline of sociology to some extent. But more importantly, that we were able to draw some practical and applicable insights that can help us navigate the world like the Dorothy of Oz would. We'd like to thank all our guests who took their time to come and share their insights with us on Tattva Deep. Now let's hear what they had to say about what sociology is. Enjoy.
So sociology is basically about people. It is about the society in which we live. And I believe that sociology is not just theoretical knowledge, but it is a practice. That's the track that I follow. Sociology is engagement with people. That's how I look at it first. The second thing is you can't be a good sociologist unless you become what I call a people's person. I'm happy only when I'm in the midst of people. That may be students, that may be groups with which I'm interacting, whom I'm studying, whom I'm trying to convey something.
Yeah. Well, I guess sociology studies the way that humans interact and create relationships, and it's about the dynamics that take place between people. People, of course, are part of the material world. We are biological beings. We are part of nature, and there are lots of things that are programmed. I guess our cells have certain programs. As natural beings, we have certain limits. There are certain things that are more or less determined. Others are within certain bounds. And the old question, I think, is what's the relationship between the natural and the social dimensions of life? Mm-hmm. And my answer would be that there's something happening between humans which can't be reduced or explained by non-social programs. There's lots of things which are not determined between people. People can do lots of things together, against each other, with each other, in ways that are not in any way biologically programmed. And the question is, I think, for many sociologists, how to account for what happens between people. Now, there's a tendency in sociology to filter out everything which is not social, and so I think there has been an unfortunate tendency to say that everything is socially constructed. And this can be misleading, I think, in the sense that as long as we talk about things between people, I think it's true that this is constructed. It's very open to all kinds of new, innovative, creative practices between people. But of course, there are certain things which are not social, which are not between people, and those things, I guess, it would not be very helpful to say they are socially constructed. I'm not saying that they determine what happens between people, but I think it's important to see that they're embedded. They interact with natural biological realities or phenomena, and that we need to understand how this all works together.
You know, it's a social science, right? It's a science, and so we're trying to seek causality, and as all science is doing. And in social science, we're trying to seek causality as in sociology, sociological questions, right? Which means, trying to understand human behavior and what leads people to think, act, and feel the things that they do. And so there's one thing to kind of focus on individuals, but then there's another whole set of issues related to when we focus on groups. So we want to understand why people, as they're operating in groups, think, feel, and act in the way that they do. And sociology is we kind of zoom out, right? And we want to kind of understand this group behavior. And I don't mean crowd behavior. I mean, people who share similar demographic traits, let's say, or cultural traits, or anything at all. And so, it's almost as though there are these kind of hidden forces that are in play that lead people to operate as individuals. Like, people are operating as individuals, but they're doing things in association or connection with the groups to which they belong, right? And so I like to say hidden, because the very simple sociology is saying, like, well, poor people are less likely to go to school or something. Well, okay, that's just a given. I mean, there's so many things that are very kind of basic, right? But then there are the other deeper questions, the hidden, the invisible factors and forces that are shaping our behavior and that we don't understand and we don't really see. And even sociologists have a very difficult time understanding them. And one of the classic studies in sociology is suicide, which is very much a personal act. I mean, it's something that any individual does on their own. You don't consult, the world about that. I mean, it's something that it's a deeply inner decision to take one's own life. And yet what we see are very similarities and commonalities between people who commit suicide, which means that there are almost like these invisible strings that are down touching us and connecting us, and the people who would take their own lives have the similar invisible strings that are touching them, right? Well, there's sociological strings, and not just psychological ones, but sociological ones, because we see people with certain demographic groups being more or less likely to commit suicide. So then the question is like, wow, what is it about, being a man or being religious or being, these other things that would lead me to make a deeply personal decision to take my life, right? So this is the sociology that's really fascinating to me, is understanding these kinds of things. So so that's what it means to me.
At the most basic, at the most elementary one, we can say that sociology is the study of society. And in substance, that is what it is. But then we have a question: what is society? Because we assume we know what society is, and that's not necessarily the case. What does society consist of? Is it something distinct from the economy, distinct from the polity, distinct from culture, or is it all of these things put together? Is it just social relations? And often one gets this question when people say, economics studies the economy, political science studies polity, and cultural studies, which of course came much later, studies culture, history studies the past. So what does sociology study? Is it something over and above all these? And in a sense it is and it is not, because it encompasses all of these. Is sociology about complex societies, or is it about what are called primitive societies? Is it about the present? Is it about the past? Is it about pre-modern societies, modern societies? Is it a distinction of method? I remember that is one of the things which at one time I used to put forward to friends who would try and sort of say, what is sociology? And I'd say, well, maybe it's a method, but maybe it's more than a method also. And so what I would say to all of these is that sociology cannot be clearly demarcated. Society cannot be clearly demarcated from the economy, from polity, from culture. What is the present, even if we say we want to study the present, is certainly shaped by the past. There are no clear lines which may have been made with the colonial division between sociology and anthropology, but there are no clear lines really between simple and complex, between traditional and modern. So we have to encompass all of these when we think of society and when we think of what sociology does when it studies society. Then it's also true that sociology has different national and academic traditions. So, for example, sociology in India is different from sociology in Europe and is different from sociology in the US, etc. Maybe we can come to some of that later. But in India, certainly we draw on many disciplines. In some parts, it's more quantitative. In some parts, it's more qualitative. My own understanding, and I think this is what becomes important in terms of also the method, my own understanding of what sociology is has evolved over time. And I think that is, in a sense, what sociology does to you. So initially when students come in and they sort of do their first course, they'll be told, okay, there are some basic units of society, there are core institutions of society, there are sort of systemic domains, and much of what I've said would be covering that, economy, polity, then family as a core basic institution. The mistake which happens then, I think, very often is that those units get almost naturalized, as though they're just there, and as though there are objects out there, there are artifacts out there, and you can just go in and you study them. Oh, we know what family is, it's right there. We know what economy is, it's right there. And this is something which, as I said, in my own thinking, it's evolved, but I think as the discipline of sociology has evolved, it's also moved a lot in this, in terms of, can we talk about core units like this? Now, in fact, what we have then is that working out what may be core units, what may be basic institutions, what may be systemic domains are part of the very process of doing sociology. If you want to understand society, you want to know what is it you're going to study after all. And the process of doing sociology is the process of defining what sociology is and defining what you might take as society.
Sociology is a discipline which has multiple approaches to understanding society, and I stress understanding, not explaining, has very different from the scientific approach. It's a way in which we understand society not in its manifest forms only, but also in understanding the tacit underlying relationships, meanings, the symbols, and the orientation and some of the trends in society. That basically is what sociology is about.
So sociology is the subject that people study initially, and generally some people continue to study sociology, and then for some the logical progression is that they move on to anthropology. So sociology is probably the more generalized idea of human societies and how human societies function, how they react to situations, and what is human behavior. So sociology is based on more generalized theoretical frameworks, whereas anthropology deals with specific social groups, specific communities, and the anthropologist looks at these communities very, very deeply, very carefully, having a good understanding of the historical background, developing an understanding of the language, trying to blend into the culture as such.